Coming up on this episode of Tom Talks Rubbish.
Addiction. Yeah, I fell really heavily into addiction. Alcoholism. Um, you know, every great writer is an alcoholic is something I've heard before.
I have
So
heard that,
which is not true, but for me it was a standard I was trying to live up to because one of my heroes is Ernest Hemingway, and he was quite an alcoholic. And yeah, so that's how I dealt with burnout at that time. I would drink to kind of come down, and that led to some pretty bad places.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talks Rubbish, and stand back for another interview. This time, I'm joined by the one and only Dariel Figueroa from Sports Illustrated. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So if we take this back to the beginning, where do you first discover wrestling as an overall fan?
Oh man, I'll tell you what, the very first time I remember watching wrestling, and I remember it like really captivating me, was when Shawn Michaels threw Marty Jannetty through the plate glass window on the barber shop. I remember I was like 6 years old, maybe 7 years old. I was sitting on the living room floor. We had one of those big, huge box TVs, that were, I don't even know what the hell they were made out of back then, but they were like, a good 1,000 pounds. And I remember just seeing, it was the big rocker split. So it was a big to do in wrestling. And I remember it just like really captivating me. It wasn't a match. It wasn't anything else other than just that angle. And then from then on, I was like, all right, I need more of this stuff.
You talked about their breakup captivating you. Was that just because of what it was? It was like someone attacking another person, or was it because you was invested in them as a team?
No, it was just someone attacking another person. I didn't really, that was like my first, that's probably my first memory of wrestling. So I don't think I knew anything about them going into that. It was just completely different than what I was used to. I was watching like, Family Matters and stuff back then.
Yeah.
So like I was watching very cozy family related content, and that just like blew my mind. I was like, wow, I didn't know you could do that on TV. So I was like, all right, I need more of that. And maybe that awakened, or maybe that touched into some sort of violent aspect of my personality. I don't know. But that's a good question.
I understand what you're saying completely there. As someone that saw the Rockers break up, and then, as I'm sure we'll get into in a bit, Shawn Michaels' star on the rise, did Marty Jannetty have a chance to be as good as Shawn Michaels, in your opinion, post breakup?
I think he certainly had the talent. And that's a question we'll never know because his personal demons got the better of him. And I'm not surprised that Marty Jannetty's story didn't happen to more wrestlers around that time, with all the unchecked drug use, with all the steroid use. Their behaviors outside of the ring weren't monitored as much as they are now. The whole drug test policy, like they really take care of the wrestlers now. So I'm surprised that Shawn Michaels, for one, was able to even get through it. He had his a whole addiction to I believe it was somas and whatever else, but Marty Jannetty certainly had the talent to get there. Promo wise, probably not as much as Michaels, and I wouldn't say he had as much charisma as Michaels, but he certainly had a chance if he was able to stay away from his demons.
What is your thoughts, as someone that's first wrestling memory was the breakup? What is your thoughts on their 1992 Raw match for the Intercontinental title?
Oh, that's a classic, man. I love that match. Shawn Michaels was in full heel mode at that time. And, I don't even think he was using the super kick as his finisher yet. I think he was using that crappy back suplex thing or whatever that was. That was his finisher on one of the video games back then. But, yeah, that was a fantastic match. And anytime they got in the ring, like that's what they did. Like that's what they were like. They were the tag team specialists before really anybody else. Maybe you could put like the Midnight Express and the Rock and Roll Express up there as tag team specialists too. Of course you could before that, but they were really the ones that were coined on a national level as tag team specialists. So when they got in there and they actually had that one-on-one match, you got to see just how good they were. They didn't need a partner. They could dance very well with just by themselves.
Mm. So you talked about how you discovered wrestling and your fandom and things. So how did you actually discover it though? Was it somebody showed you? Was it flipping channels? How did you become aware of wrestling?
It was just flipping channels. Yeah, it was flipping channels. And I don't even think I had control of the remote. I think maybe my stepdad was like watching TV, he was flipping channels, then maybe went off to the kitchen to do something, and it was just left on, and I was just like captivated by it. And I remember from then on, I really started to like pursue wrestling content. I would watch it on Saturday mornings. Back then, I don't think they had Monday Night Raw yet. So I would watch it on Saturday mornings. I would go to the local, I know this is dating myself quite a bit, but I would go to the local video store and I would rent like previous WrestleMania tapes on VHS. And, I would really, I got enthralled by like the history of pro wrestling, like everything that came before it that I didn't know about. And I would also, this is how much of a wrestling nerd I am. When back when like magazines were like a big thing in like a Walmart or whatever, I don't know what it is over there, but you had your magazine racks, and so like every year they would publish this almanac, and I can't remember if it was Pro Wrestling Illustrated that did it, but this almanac of like all the wrestling shows, WCW or NWA, all the way up to the present with WWE, and they would like have every single pay-per-view results in there, and like they would tell you the whole lineage of all the champions. So I remember I would go on car rides and I would just read that thing. Like every year I would get a new almanac and just pretty much just read it and imagine the matches in my head, because that's how much of a nerd and sick person I am. But I loved it, man.
That's
I loved
really
it.
cool though.
Yeah. No, it was great. I loved it, man. It was like it really captured my imagination.
Do you think there's sort of a lost art to wrestling in that respect? Because you said you imagined the match or you watched a match maybe a few years down the line and things like that. Do you think there's a lost art to wrestling in that respect at all? Or do you think, oh no, wrestling's way cooler, the fact that everything's at the touch of a button now?
I think it's lost some of that mystique, but as has just about everything else. Everything else is so much more accessible these days. You look at something like the music industry, and artists are putting out songs every single month, sometimes every week, new stuff, because they have to stay on top of that pile of content that we're just being inundated with on a daily basis. I forget what the stat is, but there's like millions of videos uploaded to YouTube like every day or something like that. And, so I think everything has lost a little bit of mystique when it comes to that. So I don't think wrestling is any different than any of those, forms of entertainment.
Do you think you'd be a fan though? Say you was a child or a younger person in this era and you discovered wrestling with the technology that we have now. Do you think you'd be a fan?
Yeah, perhaps even more so, because I would have an iPad in front of me and I would probably know how to use it.
Oh
And
yeah.
I would be, because my kids learned how to use the iPad when they were like 2 years old. So like, I imagine I'd probably be just as interested today. And today we're going through another golden era of wrestling. So I think I would be just as much a fan as today as back then.
You brought up there the golden era of wrestling that we're in today. So where, as we record this in um November of 2024, because there's a good chance this could air in 2025. I'm not gonna lie.
No worries.
So where is your current fandom as we record this in November of 2024?
I think wrestling is as good as ever right now. Triple H. Now, if you asked me a year ago when Vince was, back in the driver's seat, I would have, I wouldn't have been as excited as I am today. Triple H has introduced long-term storytelling back into the business, which is something that I think it needs. Vince was very much fly by the seat of his pants. No, complete disregard for what's going to happen a couple months from now. Like
Yeah.
Triple H really, and long-term storytelling is what works today. That's like really, and that almost harkens back to the old days, where you had guys like Ric Flair and Bruno Sammartino and Pedro Morales holding the title for years. So, very, Triple H is almost kind of like a throwback, which is really interesting when you think about it, because Vince is the one who aged out of the business, and he's a relic of the old times, but for some reason he wasn't able to keep his finger on the pulse of the industry, and Triple H can. And he takes care of the wrestlers much better, which is going to introduce much more longevity into their careers. And really just he's cultivated a kind of culture and a storytelling style that is just like really amazing right now. And I'm really happy where, at least where WWE's at right now.
What about outside of WWE? Do you consume anything outside of WWE?
Yes. Yeah. So I got, man. All right. So this is a good question. Yeah. Yeah. I've always loved all the stuff outside of WWE. Like the one thing I probably don't watch as much is like Stardom and some of the, the female, the women's wrestling from outside WWE, but I watch All Japan, New Japan. I watch, I don't know if Dragon's Gate is around anymore, but I used to watch a lot of Dragon's Gate. I used to be obsessed with All Japan from, the 90s All Japan. I love all that stuff. Stan Hansen and Misawa and Kenta Kobashi. I adore that whole era. I love New Japan in the 90s was great with Muda and, you had the Three Musketeers back then. That was incredible. So yeah, I watch everything, man. And as far as like American stuff goes, I love AEW. I pay attention to GCW. I used to watch CZW. I was a pro wrestling student for CZW because they're from here up in the Northeast. So I went to their wrestling school. And that was back in 2001. I was a student there at their wrestling school. So I was absorbing like everything. I remember, oh man, there was a New Jersey Federation that was a indie promotion that was around here that Low Key was a part of, Samoa Joe was a part of, Bryan Danielson was a part of, like a lot of guys and that was like the precursor to Ring of Honor. Ring of Honor, I was a big fan of too. So, yeah, I've watched everything. And like back before Dragon Gate was Dragon Gate, it was like Toryumon Dragon or Dragon Toryumon or something like that. If you go back to like the early 2000s. So like I was, and I even liked, the deathmatch stuff. I had like my time period with the deathmatch stuff where I was watching, man, I forget his name right now because I'm Onita. I used to watch Onita stuff.
Yeah.
I love Onita, man. He was amazing. A lot of their stuff was a little sus, but Onita was incredible, dude. Like that cage match with him and Hayabusa, and like, so I've watched everything, man.
So you talked about there being a student of CCW. So what was your original dream then, to be a pro wrestler?
Yeah, that was like my first dream, was to be a pro wrestler. Like I never was interested in the pro wrestling journalism stuff. I just wanted to be a pro wrestler. And I chased that as soon as I turned 18. So like before you turn, at least at the school I was going to up here in Sewell, New Jersey, you had to, or I believe it was Westville at the time. Sewell is where they were wrestling. But you had to be 18, at least 18 years old. Or I think otherwise insurance wouldn't cover you or something like that. So I worked at like ShopRite from like 16 to 18, and I saved up a bulk of my money as a cashier while I was going through high school. And as soon as I turned 18, I went to John Zandig at the pro wrestling school there and just gave him like 2 Gs. And I was like, just train me, dude. Like, this is all I want to do. I just want to be a pro wrestler. And I was doing really well. And then I ended up blowing out my left shoulder. And that kind of like ended my dream, unfortunately.
Was that through sort of, I don't want to say lack of desire after you got injured, or was it sort of you were told, look, you can't do this, you're going to get injured even more?
Man, it was for what, like I kept getting in the ring, so that was part of the issue. Like John would have to like yell at me to get out of the ring because I would dislocate it, pop it back in, and go back in the ring. So it wasn't that so much. It was really a mixture of me not rehabbing the injury properly. Back then there wasn't, this was 01. So over 20 years ago. Back then, like the doctors, like I even had surgery. I had orthoscopic surgery to reattach my labrum, and they, took out all like the spurs and everything, and it still didn't fix the issue. And I probably didn't rehab it properly. And then it just got to a point where I was getting too old, and the shoulder wouldn't stay in the socket. So I kind of called it quits on that because I was just tired of not being able to perform properly.
Is there sort of any sort of resentment, for lack of a better word, on your own part that you didn't get to live your dream?
Absolutely.
Okay.
100%, 100%, man. 100%. I'll keep it real, man. Yeah, dude. And I have dreams of like, I'll have dreams where I'm like, back in the wrestling ring. Cause I had a blast. Like when you're doing that well, like when you're doing well in a wrestling ring and you're having fun and you know how to bump and you know all the holds and I was a student of the game. I would study Ric Flair's chops and the way Ricky Steamboat would do arm drags, and I would do everything like I would literally like do slow mo on a VHS and like watch exactly how they did everything. So I was like a real student of the game. So I was heavily invested in it. And now at the same time, I was also heavily invested in writing. Writing is the one thing that I've always loved, even more so than wrestling. So I was able to fall back on that and have a fairly successful writing career. But yeah, man, that's like the one thing that's like, like if you have the girl that got away, that was like my one like
Yeah.
dream that got away, so, but it's okay. Like I've dealt with that resentment and, does it still linger? Yeah, it does. It does. It still stings a little bit. And I always think, what if I rehabbed the shoulder properly, what could have been, but, it's all good.
It's really cool that you seem to have dealt with it. So, if you could have a conversation with yourself from when you um, injured your shoulder to basically say to them what to do, what do you think that conversation would be? And then, if we go back to where you were after you sort of gave it up and was struggling in your own words, sort of thing, what would that conversation be like because of where your life is now?
Man, that's a really good question, man. You're very good at this. All right. So I would say I would say
Thank you. I
if
appreciate that.
yeah, if I would talk to my younger self, I would say slow it down. Take your time. That's the one thing I didn't do because I was young and I thought I was invincible and it was just go 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 all the time and I had that kind of mentality. I didn't slow down enough to properly rehab the injury. And if I did do that, then I probably would have come out on the other side healthy, and I would have been able to continue my pursuit towards wrestling. Because like if I sucked at wrestling, I would have been like, all right, at least I tried that. But I was fairly good, man. Like I was training with like Trent Acid and a bunch of really good guys. Chris Cash, R.I.P. Was my friend, and I was training with GQ and Nick Burke, and I was being trained by Eddie Valentine and John Dahmer. These are all really excellent performers, and Zandig was jumping in there with me too. And I really had the chance to go somewhere with it, and it's all my fault. I don't blame anybody else. So I would tell my younger self to really just slow down, take time to rehab the injury. There'll be plenty of time to continue pursuing this. I should have taken like a good year off to rehab it, but I didn't
Mm.
do that. I kept jumping in the ring.
What do you think your younger self would say about where your writing career has taken off and things like that?
Um, it's another good question. I think my younger self would be happy. I mean, writing was the first thing I ever fell in love with. I won a short story contest, like a regional short story contest in fifth grade. And that was the first thing I was ever good at. I was never good at
Mm.
team sports. I sucked at baseball, basketball. I tried, amateur wrestling once. I sucked at that. So when I won that short story contest in fifth grade, I was like, oh my God, dude, like I'm actually good at something. So
Mm.
I've been pursuing that ever since, and I'm kind of like rebuilding. I'm in a place where I'm rebuilding my career right now because I did reach a certain echelon back in the early 2010s of being a senior features writer at Uprocks and writing for Paste and writing for Heavy and writing for fairly big publications, getting like 2 million views a week. Um, Doing a lot of long form investigative type stuff. And now I'm kind of like rebuilding my career because I pivoted into marketing. But anyway, I digress. But I'm happy where I'm at right now, man.
Mm.
Like I'm doing well. I'm healthy. I think I'm writing fairly good stuff. There's always room for improvement.
What made you, if you was having such a good time with writing and enjoyment with writing, what made you pivot then into marketing side then?
Kids. Kids, man, kids are expensive. So I wanted to, I just wanted to make more money. And like, I had reached as high as I could as a writer could at Uprocks. So I was senior features writer. I was regularly, crushing my quota within a week. We had like a 500,000 page view quota per month. I was pulling in like 2 million a week. And then, you know, I had my first child in 2015. Or no, when was it? I'm trying to remember now. 2015 was my daughter was born. Then my son was born in 2018. So I really wanted to make more money because as reaching that upper echelon, I was barely even making 50,000 a year at that time, dude. So I was like, you know what? Like, this isn't like if I'm one of the best writers on the website for this huge website that's pulling in 2 million views a day, then like, and I'm barely hitting 50 with my bonus. Like, this isn't it. I got to go find something else. So that's why I pivoted into marketing because I wanted to make more money personally, but I also want to provide a good life for my kids too.
That's really, really cool. And I think because I've had conversations with content creators and writers that are parents as well. And it is cool that you see, for lack of a better word, the sacrifice that some people will make to let this sounds proper cheesy, but to let their kids live their dreams, you sometimes have to sacrifice your own. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's 100% true. And that's something that I think about all the time. Like, it's really not so much. I still have an ego, I'm not going to lie. I still have an ego, and that's something that I battle with every day. And I want to achieve stuff that fulfills, that ego, as awful as my ego is. So it's kind of like a balancing act. Like, what can I do that fulfills me personally and spiritually, but at the same time provides for my children at the same time. And it's kind of a higher wire act, and you got to try things that you never tried before. And especially with content, because content has changed so much in the last 15 years. When I started writing, 15 years ago, it has changed so much. Like, I remember in university, I had a magazine writing class. Like, there are no magazine writing classes anymore, So it's like it's changed so much. And during that time when I pivoted in the marketing, that was also part of the decision too. Is like, Facebook had downgraded like all the media sites at that time. We weren't getting as much views, so I could see the writing on the wall. I meant that I was not going to get paid more. Probably wasn't going to get a bump in pay no matter how many views I pulled in. And so it was just time to try something else.
So when did you make the decision then? I'm going to give writing another shot, and then I'm going to try with wrestling this time. I know it was a lot of pop culture stuff the first time around.
Right. Yeah. Well, I've always written a little bit about wrestling. Like, I did like a top 50 ECW.
My mistake. Sorry.
No, it's all right. No, I mean, it wasn't my main job like that. Much of my writing is now. So I was writing about a little bit of wrestling content for Uprocks. It was very sparse. Like, I wasn't writing a ton. I remember I did like a top 50 ECW stars of all time, and then I did one piece about I did like some ECW content. I did some WWE content, but I was never doing it a lot. I was doing more like true crime stuff and doing pop culture investigations, pop culture opinion pieces. But I would say earlier this year, I caught wind that Sports Illustrated was trying to rebuild their pro wrestling site. Sports Illustrated is, a storied publication and somewhere I always wanted to write for. And when I saw that it was, pro wrestling, which is right up my alley, something I followed since I was 6 years old, just made sense, and like through this, I've really kind of discovered how much I love, like rediscovered how much I love writing. I adore writing. It's the one thing that I've always made sure I progressed as far as skills. I read a lot and I do write a lot. Just it was never online for a while. For a few years, it was mostly just ghost writing a lot of stuff for big businesses. So now that I'm back, with a byline, I got my name on the byline now of my pieces, and I'm not ghostwriting anymore, and I'm writing for a publication as big as Sports Illustrated. It's really made me think about like what's next. What else can I do? You know.
What is next then? What are, as I told you off camera, this may go up in 2025. So if we said, what are some of your goals for 2025 in writing, what would they be?
I would love to publish a memoir I've been working on. I would love to sell a screenplay. And I would love to write a graphic novel. Those are probably at the top of my list. I have a ton of writing goals, but like those are three that are like top of mind. Is I have an idea for a graphic novel. I love graphic novels. Um, I want to write one of those. I want to write a screenplay. In 20, I believe it was 2012, I came in third place at the Philly Film Festival screenwriting competition,
Oh wow.
and I got it was like a 2-round competition over a few weeks, and I got, um, as third place winner, I got a seat in front of a couple film executives. One was like Showtime, another one was HBO. And I can't remember what the other one was. Might have been Disney or something. And I got to sit down with them and like workshop my screenplay. But then, events, life events being life events, life getting lifey. I
Yeah.
never finished that. I never really tried to sell that screenplay. So that's something I would really like to do in the next year.
Well, you talked about true crime as well. As a big true crime geek, I'm really curious to know what was sort of the strangest story you ever found out when during your true crime writing days?
Oh man, that's a good question. So there was this, and I never got to publish this piece because I ended up leaving Uprock. So I would like to write about this still. So there's this family in Oklahoma who went missing for a time, months, and no one knew what happened to them, and they were acting very strange before they went missing. So they moved into a storage container into their that was on their driveway. They moved out of the house and into a storage container, and the reason they did that before they went missing is because the parents, I think it was a, it was a father, a mother, and I think it was just one child, one young child, and I believe she was like 8 or 9 or something like that, maybe a little bit older, but young child. And so the three of them moved into the storage container, and the reason they did that is because they thought their house was haunted.
Mm.
At least the parents did. And it gets even crazier because then, before they went missing, and this is just maybe like weeks before they went missing, they went to their pastor. They were going to church, and they went to their pastor and they asked their pastor, or maybe it was a priest, I'm not sure, if he could create spiritual ammo for them so they could shoot the demons in their house. So there's a lot of theories as to what happened. So the family ended up getting found. At least their remains were discovered months later. And the remains were so decomposed they couldn't figure out a cause of death.
Oh.
And then there's like a bunch of other stuff that was going on where, a lot of people in the neighborhood thought that they were running drugs from like Mexico. No, not running drugs, running guns from Mexico. And they were like drug runners or gun runners. And I actually spoke to a couple people in their community, and I actually got the pastor on the phone and did an interview with him.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, so it was going to be a really interesting piece to try to, because no one knew what happened to this family. No one knew how they died or what. So that was going to be probably the most interesting story. And then, life being lifey again, I wasn't able to publish that, but that's something I still would like to revisit.
Using your investigative journalism side, what do you think happened?
I think the whole ghost apparition stuff was due to either mental illness or drug use. And I think they were involved in some pretty nefarious activities. It might have been gun running. It might have been, drug smuggling. And I think they fell on the wrong side of a cartel possibly and paid the price for that.
I can, based on what you've told me, I can see that, to be honest. So
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, since you've been back writing in wrestling, how has that changed your fandom? Where was your fandom before you started uh, picking the writing back up again? And then how has that changed it?
So I would say I pay attention more to the nuance of wrestling now. the nuances of different performers and their performances, as well as the behind the scenes stuff, like how does what Triple H and what the company is doing, TKO, what they're doing, how that affects the product. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the product on the TV. We talk about contracts and we talk about relationships and we talk about all these things, and in the end, the reason we talk about them is because it affects what we see when we watch the product on TV or streaming or whatever. So I definitely pay attention more to the backstage the going ons, if that's even a word.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I pay attention to everything that's just like, it's a whole world, it's a whole industry, and like any other industry, there's a lot of moving parts. And as a wrestling journalist, you try to pay attention as much as you can to all of those things, and also take a lot of things with a grain of salt, because not everything you hear about is true. There was a story that just came out that WWE was intentionally, or this might have been around for a while, but WWE was intentionally feeding untrue or false info to Dave Meltzer. And they were doing that on purpose, to kind of throw the interwebs into just a state of never really knowing what's going on, for lack of a better word for that. But confusion, that would be confusion. That's the word.
Yeah, but I do understand what
I'm getting old, dude, so I forget words all the time. But so yeah, like, so now I pay attention more to the, like, what's going on, but behind the scenes, and to the nuances of performances.
That's really, really cool. You may not have experienced this yet, as you said yourself, you're so new to the writing game again with wrestling. How do you deal with burnout as a content creator?
Oh, I've been there, man. I've been there. Yeah, I started writing back when I was in 2012. I started writing online. So up until about 2017, I was writing just 5 years straight. There was a time I was writing for Heavy where I was going to New York. I was going to the Manhattan office every single weekend, sometimes twice a week, and that's from here in South Jersey. That's quite a haul. And I was coming back the same day. So that's 4 hours on a bus every day. I was doing that. So I've been there, man. I've had that burnout, and today what I try to do is just pace myself a little bit better. And once you have experience with this, then you know what you can handle and what you can't handle, and um, you know, preparation is clutch. Like, you want to prepare as much as possible. Don't wait for the last day to try to turn something in and do all your research in one day. Like, do a little bit every day. That kind of stuff. It really all adds up. Um, Trying to stay away from procrastination. Like, it's going to be like, now I'm much more experienced with writing, and I know how to plan pieces out. I know how to pace myself. I know the exact amount of workload I can handle and can't handle. Because burnout is real, and I've experienced before, and it led me down a pretty nasty path back, in 2015, 2016. So now I'm much healthier now, and I understand better what my limits are.
What if you don't want to talk about it, it's totally fine. But what was that path back in 2015, 2016?
Yeah, addiction. Yeah, I fell really heavily into addiction, alcoholism. Um, you know, every great writer is an alcoholic, is something I've heard before.
I have
So,
heard that,
which is not true, but for me, it was a standard I was trying to live up to, because one of my heroes is Ernest Hemingway, and he was quite an alcoholic, and yeah, so that's how I dealt with burnout at that time. I would drink to kind of come down, and that led to some pretty bad places. So now I'm completely sober, and living a pretty healthy life, and it's much easier to stay away from burnout when you aren't drunk all the time.
yeah.
So yeah.
You talked about being, in your own words, drunk all the time. How did
Mhm.
that affect your work, do you think?
Oh, I got fired from Uprocks. Yeah, they
Oh,
fired
wow.
me. Yeah, yeah. I pretty much stopped handing in content, and I was getting paid salary. So, yeah, I got straight up fired. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, dude. I try to be as honest as possible these days, and like,
Oh, wow.
I'm not gonna like shy away from the fact that I was in a really bad place at that time. I went to rehab a couple times. Like, it was a whole journey, man. It was a whole journey, and one that I'm glad that I'm through now, and now I'm able to help other guys that are going through that, that time period in their lives where they just can't control their drinking or their drug use or whatever their addiction is. It's a mental health disease is what it is at the end of the day. So part of my responsibility these days is to help other guys that were in the same place I was in get through it, and hopefully they can help out the next guy.
What was every addict that I've spoken to has that point that they're like, I think I might be an addict, for lack of a better word. So what was your moment, for lack of a better word, if you're comfortable talking about that?
Sure, why not? In 2013, I had a seizure from acute withdrawal from alcohol. So the withdrawal from alcohol and benzos are the only two that can actually kill you. They'll stop your heart. You'll have a seizure. You could stop your heart. You can have a stroke. They both work on the same cell receptor, so that's why they both have similar withdrawals. So I didn't know that at the time. I was ingesting benzos from my doctor and drinking on top of that, and then one day I decided to get sober, which was a really bad idea to cold turkey either of those substances. I was going to do a cold turkey on both, and so I had a seizure, and that was after that I went to rehab. And that started my journey.
That's really, really powerful, I think. Is that similar to what happened to Big Bill a few years ago?
It is, yeah. From what I read, it is, yeah. And look at him, dude. He looks great, and he's healthy again. And all the power to that guy, because I know exactly how tough that is. Addiction is, man, it sucks, dude. And I've seen a lot of people die from it. Unfortunately, when you live that lifestyle, and then even in recovery, when you're trying to help other people out, you see a lot of people not be able to beat that disease, and it's really sad, because they leave behind, kids, they leave behind parents wondering what if, and it's sad. So, but thankfully he was able to beat it. I was able to beat it, and it's never truly gone. It's something that you have to work at every day, yeah.
How long sober are you, if you don't mind me asking?
22 months.
That's really cool, though. That is very cool. So when you do get your life back on track with writing and stuff, where do you want? We talked about your bucket list sort of thing. What do you? We'll wrap this up in a second. So I do have two questions for you. Do you view your writing as a success so far? And what do you think your legacy in this space is?
I think what I've done so far has been successful. I'm not done though. I have a lot more to do. I want to do long form in the wrestling space, long form investigative pieces in the wrestling space. Maybe even segue into documentaries. I think there's a lot of stories, a lot of untold stories in the wrestling space that deserve to be told, and that's something I definitely want to explore. I was doing a lot of long form investigative stuff for Up Rocks, a lot of deep dive type stuff. And I kind of want to bring that same skill set to the wrestling space, because I think wrestling is it doesn't really have that long form deep dive type investigative edge to it as far as most of the content that's out there. A lot of it is mostly just news and rumors, and there's some places that are doing like long form deep dives in the wrestling, but I think that's definitely kind of like a blue ocean type space that I would really like to get into. And then my legacy, I don't know, man. I haven't really even thought about legacy. Like I have so much more that I want to do, and I'm capable of so much more. And I don't know. And I'm really glad I had this conversation with you, because now I get to think about all these things, and it's important to ruminate on these things, because, we only get one life, YOLO, right? So, I don't know. Maybe in a year again, ask me that.
That's really, really cool. As someone that's done some great interviews themselves, I'm really curious to get your thoughts on this. Where can I improve? What did you enjoy about this conversation? Everything in between.
Oh man, your follow-up questions are amazing, dude, because I know those are questions that you couldn't have written down because you're following up on something I just said. your follow-up questions are stellar, dude. Like that's the one thing I'm highly impressed with you. Other than that, I really don't see any holes in your game. Like you're quite the hell of an interviewer, man.
Well, thank you, Cantor. I really appreciate that. This has been quite a heavy episode. So to wrap this up, we're going to do my fun wrap-up segment, which is called Generic Questions. Those of you that have seen my interviews before will know where you'll be asked your favorite match, favorite pay-per-view card, favorite wrestlers, favorite pay-per-view card, such as Double or Nothing 2019, favorite wrestlers entrance team, favorite tag team, and favorite wrestler. Basically, the questions I assume you're asked on social media. So now you'll have a place to be like, I've answered this. Please go watch this. So what's your favorite match of all time?
Perfect. My favorite match of all time would probably be the 3 Stages of Hell match with Triple H and Stone Cold. I believe that was in 2001.
No Way Out, I believe.
Yes, No Way Out. Yes. And it ended with the cage match. That is such a chef's kiss of a storytelling in the ring. I love that match, man. Those were 2 guys that were at the very height of their powers, that were able to just tell, a Rembrandt, a Picasso, just a masterpiece in the ring. And I love that match.
That's really, really cool. What about your favorite overall pay-per-view card?
Survivor Series 1998, baby. What was it? Deadly Games, right? Yeah. I love that pay-per-view, and I'll tell you why, dude. Like the storytelling going into that show was like everyone in that tournament mattered, and everyone in that tournament had their own narrative going on. And the masterstroke in that was during the tournament, you see all these different storylines kind of intertwine with each other, and they all play an impact. And then you have the swerve ending with Rock becoming a heel and winning the title at the end. It's like, dude, that is a perfect pay-per-view in my opinion.
That's really, really cool. Just quickly, it sounds like I know the answer based on the match and the pay-per-view. You're a story over moves guy, correct?
I would say they're both. Dude, that's tough. That's a tough question. Like I love both equally.
Okay. What about your favorite wrestler's entrance theme?
Oh man, that would have to be the old school Jeff Hardy entrance theme. That was always a great one, dude. When he became a single star, the dun 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 dun, and he's like dancing with the finger guns.
The one that seems to be, I don't know if you found this, but when you watch a movie or a TV show, you might just hear it randomly. They use it as like stock music. I don't know if
it might be.
That has happened a few times to me.
I'm not surprised. It's a great theme.
What about your favorite tag team?
My favorite tag team, man, I would have to say the Briscoe brothers.
Mm.
The Briscoes, not the old Briscoes, like the new one, Jay and Mark Briscoe.
Mm.
I used to watch. So the first time I saw them was in 2001 at a CZW show. I don't even think they were 18 years old yet, and they were incredible, dude. I saw them face each other at I think the first or second best of the best tournament for CZW. 5-star match, incredible. The J Driller back then was unheard of. No one was ever doing that back then. And Mark Briscoe's athleticism, he was doing like that, moonsaults off the top onto the floor, which was completely concrete. And then I remember Jay Briscoe's match against Justice Page. This is over 20 years ago. And I just remember saying like that dude, Jay Briscoe, is going to be a star. Cause I'm pretty sure he wasn't even 18 yet when he had that match with Justice, what's his name? Justice Payne. Yeah. Who passed away, unfortunately. He was a great talent as well. But yeah, the Briscoes were just like amazing, man. I think they were all self-taught in the backyard and like they were that. Yeah, they were incredible talents. They're from Delaware. And I remember talking with Mark Briscoe like when he was just like 19 or 20 backstage at a CZW show. And I was just always really, really impressed with their talents and what they became, Ring of Honor, multi-time tag team champions. And it was a tragedy that Jay passed away. But I think Mark is carrying the flag for that family pretty well today.
You brought up Jay passing away there. What do you think the Briscoes' legacy as a tag team is?
Man, they That's a good question. I'm not sure what their legacy. I mean, I think for one, they're one of the greatest tag teams of all time. They need to be in that discussion. Just with the amount of talent that they worked with, the quality of their matches. Who knew Mark can cut such a hell of a promo? Like his promo skills are amazing now. I never knew, because they never gave him in Ring of Honor. They never gave him that chance to cut a lot of promos. It was mostly Jay doing all the talking. And then after Jay passed away, Mark had that one promo on AEW where I was just like, dude, that might be the best promo of the year.
Yeah.
I forget what it was, but it was like a backstage promo, and he was talking about, his brother and how he was going to do this match for his brother. And it was like incredible promo. But I think just the, if anything, the legacy they'll be remembered for is the quality of all their matches, dude. From the ladder matches they had to, all the different, even wrestling in Japan. The quality of their matches was always, second to none.
That's really, really cool. And then finally, the biggest generic question, in my opinion: who is your favorite overall wrestler?
Man, that's so hard. That's like asking me what my favorite movie is, but I will give you an answer. I'm going to have to say the guy that put everything together better than anyone else would probably be Stone Cold. He had just every single element that you would want in a professional wrestler. He could talk his ass off. He could wrestle his ass off. He had incredible charisma. He also has one of the best entrances ever, by the way. Like his entrance is incredible, especially when they used to do the glass breaking for him and he would just walk out like just ready to kill anyone. Like, man, like talk about aura. Like that's like, yeah, he had it, dude. He had that raw animal magnetism, but he also had that incredible charisma. That's really hard to find in any kind of performer.
That's really, really cool. As we wrap this up, the question I end this show on is, I believe as YouTubers, podcasters, even writers, in your case, and people with just social media, what is one piece of content you want to be remembered for? Then what is one that you're like, yuck, please forget about that?
Wow. Okay. So the one I would like to be remembered for is probably the true crime deep dive I did on Lawrence Horn, who was he was Motown's chief engineer, and he like really perfected Motown's sound during the height of their powers. And he hired a hitman to kill his family. And then the ensuing trial afterwards. I was the first person to publish any picture of Lawrence Horn. Now, if you see a picture of Lawrence Horn on the internet, it was one that I probably published. And I was the first person to even like write in extent about that whole case. I had to comb through like microfiche, and no one really knew anything about it when I published it back in like 2015, I think it was. So that one I would like to be remembered for. And then one I would not like to be remembered for, even though it went viral, was about this woman getting her butthole bronzed on Up Rocks. That went completely viral, so viral that that story was number 1 or number 2 in search results for the term butthole.
Wow.
So while that sounds cool, I don't want my name associated with the word butthole. So if I could scrub that one from the record book, that'd be great.
That's really, really cool. As we wrap this up, obviously I want to say thank you for a great conversation, but please promote yourself. Where can the good people find you, your work, etc.?
Yeah, just you can find me at on SI Wrestling, which is Sports Illustrated's wrestling coverage, and then on X/Twitter at FiggyFlow, FIGGYFLOW. That's pretty much it, man. I keep a low profile on social media, so if you want to hit me up, if you want to talk to me, definitely hit me up on X, and we can chat, man. I'm open to talking to just about anyone.
It's well worth doing, guys. One of the most open conversations I think I've had so far, but one of the nicest people in this space as well. So if you guys like this, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talks Irish on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter or X at Tom Talks Irish, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye now.
Thanks for watching this Tom Talks Rubbish conversation. Before you go, please make sure you leave a like on the video, share it around, and subscribe to Tom Talks Rubbish on YouTube, as well as follow Tom Talks Rubbish on Twitter/X.